I don't want to do something that's high risk and high consequence at the same time. That is what we are registering when we are just like deathly afraid, is we're like, the risk is too high and the consequence is too high.
Brandon Judd is a coach, athlete, and speaker. He's the founder and head coach of his company, Wake Coaches, a marketplace and e-commerce platform for students and coaches in the towed water sports industry. Brandon was formerly an instructor editor at Wakeboarding Magazine, production director at Learn Wake, and contributing instructor at Boating Magazine, senior coach at Wakeboard Camp, and more. How you doing today, Brandon?
Doing great. How you guys doing?
Awesome.
Feeling good. I just want to talk a little bit about how we met. So I served a mission for our church in Florida at the ripe age of 18. And when I got on the scene, Brandon wasn't a missionary, but he was a member of the church there that just, I feel like, I'll have him talk a little bit more about this, but I feel like he just naturally took me under his wing. We had he taught me how to teach and communicate, and some of those skills that have stayed with me today, that I'm really grateful for, because, you need those coaching skills, those teaching skills. They carry with you throughout business. What do you remember about those times, Brandon?
Oh man, it was fun. You guys were such moldable clay. It was so fun getting to work with you. And I mean, it did really just come naturally to me. I had been just in that cadence of all the missionaries that came through, that were representing our church to the people locally. I had a vested interest in that. I wanted you guys to, be successful too. And I had been a full-time representative of our church as well previous to that, and ended up finding that in that process myself, I learned a ton from my leaders and mentors, and I kind of had a knack for passing that knowledge on. And so I was one of the leaders in my mission, and I traveled across multiple states and taught groups of missionaries. And so it was just something I was really passionate about. And so I always tried to, if I saw that the missionaries that were assigned to the area that I lived in, if I saw that they were, moldable clay, if you will, and, we kind of hit it off, I would offer to kind of help guide them in learning how to sharpen their teaching skills, because it's often something that people gloss over and just assume that will come naturally to everyone, and it doesn't. And so it was really fun to kind of help bake that into you guys early on, and then see where you took it after that. And it was kind of fun because you guys ended up, and a lot of the missionaries that came through that area later on ended up being in the leadership of your mission in that area. And so I kind of had an in for a while in that entire region, because all the leaders there were sort of
your pupils, your Padawans.
Yeah, so it was fun. I felt like I had kind of like this, secret back door to what all was going on in the larger picture in my area. It was kind of fun to have people call me and be like, "Hey, we're dealing with this problem. What'd you do? How do you fix it?" And then so there's a lot of that, and that was just so fun. I mean, it blessed my life as much as it did your guys' experience there too.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember, before we move on, we're going to get into the full story, but I remember him drawing up diagrams, and one specifically was like this irrigation system. It was basically like, you have the knowledge and you want to get it to the people you're trying to teach. And all that's in between are just little spigots that you have to unlock and help them understand what's going on. So things like teaching for understanding, active listening, things like that are skills that I really attribute gaining from Brandon. And I use them today because, we're going to talk about wakeboarding today, but in my business, moving, I have a philosophy, sell to serve, which is basically like, you need to let people know why they need to go with you, or you're doing them a disservice. And a lot of that comes down to those communication skills I originally gained from being mentored by you. So thank you for that. Let's go kind of on your timeline a little bit. Some of the, we want to hear your story, and we might pause you at moments that we feel like were really significant. So tell us a little bit about your background and the story, how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, there's so much there. We could spend a long time because it's such a funky, storied way that I got through this and kind of figured out along the way. I had a friend and colleague recently tell me when I was talking about my business, they're like, "You're building the airplane as you're flying it, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." That's very much what it feels like. So it's very unconventional feeling in a lot of ways. But I started out with just a raw passion and desire to wakeboard. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. So my family had a boat for, a year and a half or so. And when we had to go buy gear for the boat, we went to a pro shop, and in those days it was on like VHS, I think. And there was a VHS on, a tube TV in the corner of the pro shop. And, it was playing the introduction to a wakeboard instructional, and the introduction just had a whole bunch of fun, riding clips on it. And, it was the first time I saw wakeboarding accurately represented, and I was kind of blown away. Something sort of stirred in my soul, and I was like,
Whoa.
I want to do that.
How old were you?
I was probably 14 or 15, something like that.
Wow.
I think 15. Yeah, I think 15. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I want to do that because that is just cool, right? So just really fought tooth and nail to pursue it. My family got rid of their boat, so I no longer had wakeboard, access to wakeboard. But I still had my gear. I still had a rope and handle. They hadn't sold all of that stuff. And so I knew that I needed to stay connected to the community. And so I went to that same pro shop and was like, "Hey, I want to work for you guys." And they said, "Sorry, we have a policy. We don't hire anyone under 18. I think I was 16 at the time. And the boat show was coming up, and I knew it was like a really busy time. And so I drove every day to the boat show, paid my entry fee, and then I showed up as early as doors would open, and I left after doors closed, and I just worked for them for free and just said, "I don't care if you're not going to hire me. I'm just going to work here until you start paying me." So I sort of like just strong armed them into hiring me, because at the end of the boat show, they're like, "Man, this kid's showing up before everyone and leaving after everyone and working just as hard, if not harder, than the guys we pay. So yeah, let's just give him a shot." And so I got hired to work at the pro shop, which at that point I was able to, every time I sold a wakeboard, I'd be like, "Hey, if you guys," because at the time I was living in Utah, and the law out there is that you have to have someone with a flag to spot the rider. You have to have a driver, a rider, and a spotter. So people often wanted to find a third, because they can find two people to go ride, but they wanted a third to be legal. And so I said, "Hey, if you guys ever need a third, let me know. I'm always down to ride with people." And they're like, "Oh, that's kind of crazy. The guy that sold me my wakeboard." "Sure, that's fine." And so I'd get people's info, and they'd call me when they'd go ride. And then I just wasn't getting as many phone calls as I wanted. And so I went down to the dock with $10 in my hand and my board and my rope. And I just picked the best looking boat that I could find and be like, "That's the one I want a wakeboard behind." And I would just hitchhike at the dock and be like, "Hey guys, I've got my own gas money, got my own gear. If you've got room for an extra rider, I'd love to join." And I wouldn't get turned down. And then I would go ride with them and be like, "Hey, that was kind of fun to watch. And like, you were really helpful. Like, don't worry about paying." So I would recycle the same $10 all summer, like just hitchhiking on people's boats, and anything I could do, scratching and clawing my way into getting better at the sport that I loved. And that's kind of where it all started. And fast forward, many years, I was in Southern California, going to college, and was married at the time, and linked up with a retired pro wakeboarder that was trying to become a movie star at the time. And so I'd drive quite a ways. I'd drive like 45 minutes to an hour up to Long Beach, where he would meet me. And I had almost no money and was like, I can't afford to pay your rates. And so I paid $50. This is back in 2009. I paid $50 for a 15-minute session, and I would, spend, a good 2 hours round trip driving,
Wow.
just to get 15 minutes. Right. And so, but that gave me some of the connections I needed. I was interning at a wakeboard company that was 2 hours south, so a 4-hour round trip. And I was working 8 hours for free, just interning to try to get connections there. I was doing that once a week, and then I was wakeboarding once a week. And then all these things started kind of coming together. I got a little bit of exposure on an online wakeboard website, had some photos and videos get put up. And I had previously been to the wakeboard camp in Florida, and I was talking with my coach at the time and was like, hey, he said, why don't you go pro? And I was like, what are you talking about? There's no way I can go pro. I don't have a boat. I can barely afford to ride with you 15 minutes once a week. Right. And my wife and I had just had a discussion where it was like, look, I got $60 in my bank account. It's $50 to go wakeboarding, and we're a little low on food, but I went wakeboarding. I had a commitment. Right.
Oh
and so we had like $10 left until paycheck. And I was like, we'll figure it out. And so we had a little discussion, and I was like, look, I don't think we could afford to do this unless I make it something that makes me money. Otherwise I got to put it to bed until I'm making enough money to justify this expensive hobby. So it's either got to be revenue generating, or it's got to go to bed for a while. And that was right when we were having that discussion. And that's when my coach was like, why don't you go pro? And I'm like, what are you smoking? Right? And so he was like, no, all you got to do is work at a camp. You're going to be able to wakeboard every day for free as a benefit of your work. And I was like, yeah, I've been to a camp before. It was awesome. I learned a ton there. That actually makes sense. Maybe this is possible. Right. So someone believed in me that there were so many naysayers before, right? Like, oh, you're too old, you're too tall, you can't, whatever. And then there was this guy who had been there, right? And he'd done it. And he was like, oh, you can go pro. He had the same build as me, right? He was also over 6 feet. And anyway, it was kind of this, hey, maybe it could happen. So there's this glimmer of hope, right? So I had a discussion with my wife about it, and all these doors started opening. Reached out to the wakeboard camp. They hired me. We moved across the country. And
to Claremont or to somewhere else?
Yeah, to Claremont. So
that's where we met.
Yeah. So that was the wakeboard camp. That place was awesome. I had great mentors there, and that was just a fantastic experience. Getting to, ride with pro riders who were still connected to and coaching at the camp, and then get to just live deep in that world every day and use the skills that I had learned, as a full-time representative of my church, teaching people and helping people, change their habits and change their lifestyle and make hard decisions and do the things they wanted to do, or rather do the things they weren't sure if they wanted to do in order to get the things they wanted to achieve. Right. So, all that experience really sort of blended together with my wakeboarding. And so I was able to start to love coaching and gained a passion for coaching. And at the same time, got to be up close and personal with the lifestyles of all the pro riders. And there were pro riders who were kind of at the sunset of their career. And I started learning, oh man, this isn't all it's cracked up to be, right? These guys are looking for, hey, I'm ready for like a grown-up job now. And how do you put on your resume, like, I was an athlete? And they're like, oh, that's cool, but irrelevant to this job, right?
Yeah.
So that really kind of opened my eyes a bit. I was talking to them as well, because I was like, well, how do I, go pro? What do I got to do? And as I had one conversation with a kind of mentor of mine that I really looked up to, and he was funny. He was saying, the times when I was just working basically minimum wage jobs, eating ramen and wakeboarding every day with my best friend, trying to become something big. That's his like most fond memories of wakeboarding, and when he was actually wakeboarding the most.
Yeah.
And then he said, the more famous I got, the more it became work, the less I actually wakeboarded. And then it was just really interesting to see like what is success to me. I had to define that, because I never had it defined, right? I was still running off of the 15-year-old me that was enamored by all these like cool moves, right?
Right.
And so I was like, whoa, I actually have to define what success is for me right now. And that started to shift things a lot. I worked for a wakeboard tutorial website where it was like a subscription based membership, and we created instructional videos. And I started coaching digitally there. I remember there was one guy in the UK that I just did a couple minutes of video analysis on a trick he was trying. And he went out the next day and landed it. And he was freaking out in the comments. He was like, I've been working on this for 10 years.
Wow.
And like, your video breakdown helped me understand specifically what I was doing. And I went out and I landed it. It's my first flip. I'm so excited. Right. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like, we can connect with people all over the globe here, and just spend an hour of my time building this thing for him to help him out. And 10 years worth of work culminates into this, euphoric moment for him. And like, that was driving me. And I learned that a lot of my motivation and fuel was the dopamine hit that I get vicariously through other people when they land their tricks, right? Like, I love it when I land a new trick, but it kind of feels selfish. It's all about me. Like, yeah, it's still fun. And you still got to walk the walk. But when I'm able to help someone accomplish something they didn't even think was possible, I get a significant amount of that reward vicariously. Like, I didn't even land a trick, but I'm feeling just as good as this guy is,
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. And I did just really love that. I kind of went through some ups and downs in the industry afterwards, trying to find out how to actually make money doing this. Because I was able to survive, but I was like, man, now I got some different goals. My things are shifting a little bit. And long story short, I went out on my own about 4 years ago, and I have my own private coaching practice, and that has grown into a marketplace for coaches and an e-commerce platform, because I just wanted to find better ways to serve my clients. I got certified as a personal trainer because I had clients that were like, hey, I want to get in shape for the season. And, I had kind of been through my own physical challenges from being at a desk job so much and expecting to still wakeboard as if I was an athlete, and having some injury from that and recovering. And so I had learned a lot in that journey, and was like, that actually, if I get certified up in that way, I can actually serve my clients better. And so the e-commerce stuff is just an extension of ways that I can better serve my clients, because I was sending them to pro shops who were doing them disservices, selling them the wrong stuff. And I was like, man, like, this is hurting you. I need to come in. Like, I can do that for you now. Yeah. And so, it's rooted in that love for helping people become their best selves, the best version of who they can be. Right. And that fuels me. I mean, it was the same thing I did, as a young missionary, helping people become their best selves and reach their goals. Same thing as a wakeboard coach. And that the shift of that definition of success for me was not landing the coolest new trick and, kind of vainly making myself the cool guy. But instead I found that in my effort to seek this benefit for others, I became a better person. I loved what I did more. I was fueled, and that was more of my why, was serving the whole person. And now I almost feel like I'm bumping up against that. Like my sport is almost limiting me in how I can help people. And so I've kind of expanded into some corporate training and public speaking stuff. And yeah, so we'll see. The horizon continues to expand, and we'll see where we go from here.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. I want to maybe just go back a little bit as well. I took some notes while you were talking. So how did you dodge the corporate world, because that story started at age 14, 15, and, it's where you still are. Like, was there ever a time when you did get, tell us about how maybe did you ever get sucked into corporate type work to give supplemental income, or was that desk job that was wakeboarding related though, right? Or were you talking about a different desk job?
So a little of both. So that was kind of the funky part of my story that made me pivot personally, just as a human. So we had kids, and I was like, I need to be more responsible. My wife is, with the kids more. I need to find ways to bring in more income. And because I had done all of that work with LearnWake, which was that tutorial instructional website, and one of my good friends and mentors was working at Wakeboarding Magazine as one of the editors, and he had moved into an advertising role, like a sales and ads role, and he needed someone to backfill his position, and reached out to me. And I was like, well, I don't know that I can turn down an opportunity to work at Wakeboarding Magazine.
Yeah.
So I worked at Wakeboarding Mag for 3.5 years, something like that. And that was a 9 to 5. It was a big shift, right? Okay. So that was am I ready to, because at that time I was still pushing to try to go pro, even though I loved coaching. And I was like, oh, coaching is kind of paying the bills, but I still want to see if I can do it. And it was kind of an eye opener. I got to see behind the scenes on everything that I was always enamored by and how it got put together. And it takes some of the magic out of it once you see how it's built. Right. But it also made some of the other, magical part of it even more enamoring. So it had its ups and downs. But because I was sitting in a chair for so long, and then I would go test boats for a while. Like, for example, we would do boat tests where I'd test 4 or 5 boats in a day on camera. So I'd be sitting for like 2 weeks and not really taking care of my body and, eating crap. And then we'd go on the water, and then I'd ride for a week and ride 4 or 5 sets a day for a week and expect my body to be in athlete shape. And it wasn't. And it really did a number on me. And then the magazine, the whole culture shift around what makes the magazine run and fuel, and a lot of the advertisers sort of became competition. So it's like when your clients are competing with you, like you need to change. And I felt really limited there. And so after working there for a while, I was kind of looking for ways to continue growing my career. I felt a little stuck, and had an opportunity. A friend reached out to me. I worked at a refractive eye surgery practice, of all places, for like 9 months.
Oh, wow.
I was their digital marketing director, and I did a bunch of content stuff for them and told stories, and it was fun, but that place was shifting and changing constantly, and I was laid off. And that's when I kind of had to make a big decision, because we had some crazy stuff happen to us in life, all within a few month period. So I was laid off. I had a rollover car accident that we flipped like 6 times. It was crazy. We had bats infest our attic during like their protected mating season. So
no way.
That. We had, I was like, I can't evict these things. And they're like, no, legally you can't pay anyone to get rid of them. It was weird. But, and then we had like a leak, in one of our, bathrooms that like we had to shut everything off and cap the pipes. Jeez. And had to like get ready to renovate all of that. And then, oh my gosh, man, it was
Mandy's a sweet wife, dude. She's so cool.
And it was everything all at once. There was like more things. I think we had lightning strike in our neighborhood that forced our sprinkler system on overnight. So there was like flooding and our sprinklers were all shot and all of our electrical stuff got fried. This is all within like a couple months, right? So like 2-3 month time period, like cars gone, like I'm beat up from the wreck, lose my job, like
bats in the attic.
Our pets' heads are falling off. Yeah. You know what I
mean? Like, well, I just look at time, like points in time that you can specifically remember like that. And I love rewinding to the crossroads, right? Like rewinding to those times when it's like, wow, we have all these things going on. Or that really stands out to me, that $10 in the bank account thing. You know what I mean? Like, because right. I think that's where you have to, in business, you have to have such a tolerance for stress, and you have to have such a tolerance for, just you have to be willing to ride with the lows. And I think at that point, that's when most people say like, look, I'm going to go get a corporate job because there's a security right there. Right.
That's what I tried to do after I was laid off. I was like, I'm going back to safety. And it was the craziest thing. Like we really felt kind of inspired to go this route because every time I tried to go back to getting a normal corporate job, I was like, we just need income to come back in to like get back on our feet.
Right. Yeah.
And it was wild because I would get almost to the point of signing paperwork and being onboarded, and then something crazy would happen. Like someone's family member dies, and so they relocate, and then the job opportunity closes. We had there was a company that relocated headquarters in the middle of my interviewing process, and so they moved the company, and I was like, I'm not moving back to California. And so like it was just crazy. It was thing after thing after thing, and I was like, man, how come all these doors are closing? And I was like, I just need money, and I know that I can instantly go coach, because while I was working within the industry, ever since I started coaching the wakeboard camp in 2010, people were requesting that I come to them to coach them. So I was doing these travel clinics, just a little bit here and there, filling my 2-week vacation with travel clinics. And so I just sent an email out to my contacts and was like, hey guys, I've got some flex time right now. If you want to hit me up, I'd love to come out and coach you for a bit. And it was just kind of like, hey, let's just cross this bridge so that we can get a little bit of cash coming in. And I got a great response, and it was more than I thought. And I was like, well, shoot, if that's not a sign, like this stuff just keeps not working out, and not seemingly like any fault of my own, like weird, act of God stuff is like happening. And then all of the wakeboard people were instantly like, yep, here we go. And so it made me take a hard look, like, do I start my own business here? Do I, like, this is going to be challenging because I'm going to do it alone. I'm going to do it from not a like high cash, high capital position. I'm going to just be hustling and grinding. And I've got a long off season to deal with. So we just said, all right, let's do it. And we rolled up our sleeves and just ran as hard as we could through the storm. And it was a crazy few years in the beginning, and it's still crazy, but it's at least more consistent. So yeah, I mean, that whole part of being an entrepreneur, I had no idea how to run a business. I had an idea how to lead people, but there were no people on my team. It was just me. So it was like, how do I lead myself better? Right. So that was crazy. Cause in the past, like at Wakeboarding Mag, it'd be like, oh, hey, we need to build this digital asset. Cool. Just send an email to the dev team, put in a ticket, and they build it. Done.
Right.
Oh, hey, I need to make an instructional video. Cool. Well, there's a sound booth. Just go schedule time in the booth, and then they'll edit it and send it back to you. Cool. Or whatever it is, we had a budget for it. And then when I go to do stuff on my own, it's like the budget is how much margin I can make. And then how I can organize all that. And then how can I find one and it's just building the airplane while you're flying it. Right.
Did you, was your wife working at all?
No, not at the time. And we would just do like little side hustle stuff. Like dog sitting and, shoot, whatever else. I mean, I think we had like 6 dogs at our house at once, like plus our dog. So it was like, it was just chaos. There's like 6 dogs, like 2 kids, or 3 kids at the time, I think. Yeah. So anyway, just bonkers. Right. And so we're just, what can we do to hustle and grind through this, especially in the slow seasons? But while I'm gone, in the summer, which I travel primarily June, July, August, I'm almost completely just absent.
Right. That's why we wanted to get this in now.
Right.
Right. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's harvest time, right? So the more I can put, boots on the ground in the summer, the more we can get income to kind of help with the winter time. And then I can have excess to throw into the business, so that it can grow. And I mean, it really feels like 8 steps forward, 6 steps back. And it's like, cool, we're gaining, but man, we're running around a lot. Right. So, it's been a fascinating process, and seeking out mentors during this process is super important. Having like-minded people to be around you to kind of help push you in the right directions is crucial, because it's so lonely, right? It's wild.
Yeah. I really like what you said about building the airplane as you fly it, because I feel like that's a trait that every business owner needs to have, because perfectionists, they struggle with this because they're waiting until, they have their perfect plan laid out to start their business, and it never comes, right? Like even this podcast, like if we waited till we had a perfect plan, we would never start it. Like,
yeah, probably not.
And same thing with his business, like, just the guts that it takes on his part to, just go for it, and just trust in yourself enough, bet on yourself, right, to know that it's going to catch up with you. So I really love that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I'm learning deeper and deeper as I go. You're totally right. And I'm very much analytical and kind of a perfectionist. So my tendency is to make it perfect before launch.
Yeah.
But I learned to give that up so that I just go. But now I find myself just going on the things that I'm not ready for.
Yeah.
So that part's really interesting. So like I recently tried to get some software plugged in to make the booking and scheduling easier between me and other coaches. And I'm not ready for it, because I was doing it all manually, and I was like, this is exhausting. But there are more half-step measures between where I am now and that fancy, easy button software that is super expensive, right? There are more half measures. The harder I look, the more I can find more half measures. And the phrase minimum viable product is continuing to mean more and have deeper and deeper meaning to me constantly. And it's very much like, if the plane won't fly, it won't work. But I don't need this super fancy jet. I don't need to go into debt to finance some jet to be like, look, I'm flying now, right? Like, I constantly am doing that. Like I find myself catching myself all the time, right? Like I would have saved so much time and energy and a little bit of money had I recognized this 2 months ago, instead of putting all this work in and then being like, oh shoot, you know what? Now that it's implemented, I can see I'm not ready yet,
Yeah, that's big time, man. I want to talk a little bit about disruption, right? Because I think what you have done has kind of changed the industry a little bit. And tell us more about what it's like to be kind of reinventing something. I think when we do business intuitively or creatively, inevitably there's going to be some disruption that takes place. Tell us about kind of what that looks like for you and your life and your industry.
Yeah. So I was just at a Dave Ramsey's Entree Leadership Summit. Their conference is fantastic. I was able to go there for a little bit earlier this week, and the way he's built his business is fascinating. If you're not familiar with it, like, look into it, because he just had the audacity to do stuff that everyone said you couldn't do, and it was awesome. So there is a big section of disrupting that that has to happen, because if you play by the rules, sometimes the people who are in the industry, who've been there a long time, set the rules up to protect them from people who could possibly dethrone them.
Yep.
So you have to stick to your principles. Obviously, you don't want to be just breaking principles, but there are rules that you should absolutely push against. The hard part is, the bigger you're disrupting, the heavier that object is you're pushing, the more friction there's going to be. So you can't just say, hey, look, I'm going to do this and take over the world, and have everyone be like, oh, that's awesome.
Go
You
ahead.
should totally do it. And we support you. We'll just get out of the way. Like, they're not going to do that. So it sounds exciting, and everyone says disruption as this buzzword of like, oh, sweet. Yeah, you're disrupting this industry. But it is so lonely, because you're the only one trying to do it. Otherwise, there'd be a whole bunch of people doing it, and it would have already been disrupted. So when you're bumping up against these rules that have been there forever, because this is the way we do it. I mean, look at how I got that job at that pro shop. They're like, sorry, we don't hire anyone under 18. It wasn't a law. They just had a policy.
Right.
And I was like, sorry, I disagree with your policy. And I could have just sent them more emails or called them more often or been annoying, and maybe it would have taken more months to prove my point, but I just said, no,
Hired yourself
I'm going
instead.
to do it. And I paid my entry fee every day at the show.
Wow.
Right. So like, I'm paying to work here. Like, I don't care. I'm doing it. And it was just a small piece, because I didn't have to disrupt all that much. I'm like, okay, like you're a year and a half away from our mark, we'll make an exception. But in my industry, there's a lot of norms that people just don't think is possible. There's negotiations that I would like to have with different manufacturers, where I don't have I'm not influential enough. I don't have enough weight behind my requests for them to care. So how do I disrupt that? Well, get stronger, get more people behind it, build this inertia to the point where they have to say, oh, okay, I'm gonna get out of the way. Right. So,
Yeah.
I would love to be able to work with people in that way. And it is very lonely, because there's a lot of people that will cheer you on from the sidelines, but not a lot of people that will run with you. And so that does make it pretty lonely, but you definitely have to challenge everything. I mean, it's constantly, does it have to be this way? I mean, that phrase gets asked in my mind all the time. Like, yes, this is the way everyone does it. Does it have to be done that way? Or can it be done a different way? And I'm sort of an anomaly in a lot of those ways, and I haven't quite disrupted things yet, but if I'm successful, hopefully when I'm successful, it will be very disruptive, and in a way that benefits the customer. And that you always have to, not disrupting for the sake of disruption. You're disrupting for the sake of the customer.
Right.
Because I am an advocate for my customers. And if the industry is staged in a way that makes their life less convenient or not being served to the fullest, then I will advocate for them, and I will push the bigger players out of the way so that they can better be served. And if I have the strength of the army of the audience behind me, that is when the bigger players in the industry are forced to yield. Right.
Wow. I love it. I think it's a fascinating topic, and it's something that you're dealing with firsthand. I won't spend too long on this, but it's something that I'm seeing in my own business, because a little bit of background with the moving industry. I've never worked for a moving company. So there's a lot of unspoken rules, like you were describing, that I don't really follow. And my admin team is getting me on this software, and we're looking at it and we're saying, like, it's set up like all the cookie cutter companies. So we're trying to kind of manipulate so it fits us, because there's lots of things that we do different that are for the customer. Like you said, we're like, well, if we change our business model to follow this software, it, like, everything that we do unique for the customer gets washed out. And so we're trying to navigate that, but it's a really important thing that you brought up. So thank you.
Yeah. And to that loneliness point, so at the summit, there was another speaker I really enjoy. He's a great author. If you haven't read his books, it's worth it. It's Dr. Henry Cloud. And he had a really good story on stage, and I'm going to butcher it. But essentially, there was this testing that was done on these monkeys, and they put a monkey in a cage, and they just made his environment as chaotic as possible, right? Symbols and lights and flashing things.
Flinging poop and bananas.
It just freaked the monkey out, right? So their goal was to just put this thing isolated in a cage and freak it out. Then they would, like, at the height of its freaking out, they would quickly draw blood and test like all those cortisol levels of stress, of how stressed it was to get a baseline. Then they did the same thing, riled it up equally, and then threw a second monkey in the cage with it, got everything back to the same experience, and then pulled them out, tested their blood levels, and it was half as stressful as it was when they were alone. Right. And so the kind of the comedic part of that was he was like, you need a monkey. Like, who's your monkey? Right. And it's hard when you're alone and you're trying to disrupt stuff and everything is crazy. And you're like, no software matches what I do because I'm trying to do it this way because it better serves the customer. And I'm, pushing this boulder uphill, and it's chaotic and stressful. If you don't have, another monkey with you, it is just almost unsustainable levels of stress. And so you'll be able to handle way more, right? That synergy, the whole idea of synergy being like one ox can pull 1,000 pounds, but two ox together,
right? They
can pull 2,500 pounds or 3,000 pounds or whatever. Right. Somehow they're able to do more together than they could independently. When they're yoked together in that way. And so there's something about that. Like, we're built and designed, and especially coming out of the pandemic, we all kind of know this intuitively. We are designed to work with people. And so you need some people in your corner, even if it's just other business owners that are, pushing their own things, to kind of be in your corner with you. 'Cause it is really hard alone. So if you're going to go run at this challenge, have someone with you, have a monkey with you, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. Did you have you found your monkey? Or like, are you still, because you said like this, it's extremely lonely for you, so have you been able to find that?
So it's kind of funny, like I would love to have monkeys closer. I feel like I have other monkeys, but they're not in my cage. They're in their own cage, but we're both in our own cages in the same room, right? You can
see each other.
So there's a glass window through the cage.
You don't feel as
the
lonely.
COVID plexiglass is there, but I mean, I have some other people who are business owners as well, and we can kind of commiserate in things and collaborate in others. And then I've got a group of best friends that are sadly like all across the country. I don't have someone locally really that I'm like, hey, let's just go hang out and
So you haven't found someone like that's in your industry, like you're finding strength from just other business owners and things like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, primarily. I mean, there's some people in my industry that like I love and we're friends, but we're so busy doing our own stuff that it's really hard to spend much time together. And I'm working on trying to grow my business to the point where it can also include people like that. And once I can get to that point, it'll be a lot easier, especially once I get to the point of hiring and all that. Right now, it's just I'm reaching out to other agencies to take things off of my plate instead of hiring someone full time because of how seasonal I am. It would be really hard to find someone really good and keep them for a long time if it's like, hey, I can have you for 4 months a year.
Yeah. What do you do the rest of the year?
Yeah,
exactly. So
maybe we should change it to the Chaotic Monkey Podcast, because that's literally what this is like going through this hectic, stressful time, and we're each other's monkeys.
Yeah, like being able to do it together, and to be able to have that strength, and that's what we hope to get from the podcast. Really is making these connections with people and being able to find that inspiration, that motivation, or that decrease in stress even.
Right.
So
totally. I wanted to bring up we're probably wrapping up soon, but I wanted to bring up for sure, you talked a little bit about passion and how at the beginning of the journey, you know, the actual act of wakeboarding was the passion. Then it changed to, you know, coaching, giving back. That's kind of, you know, you want to get into more just like affecting people besides just those who wakeboard. I want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of how the concept of passion has changed for you over time.
Yeah, absolutely. That part surprised me a little, right? When you're young, you hear all these like follow your passion and do what you love and all that stuff. And then as I was pursuing that, I had so many naysayers that were like, oh, you can't do the thing you enjoy. You're supposed to do work you hate. That's how life is. And I'm like, I reject that notion. Right.
Yes.
But then you get the other side of it where people are over preaching, just do the thing you're passionate about. But if anything that you love and you think, oh, it'd be so great to work in that environment. If you do that 24/7, it will eventually not be as fun as you thought it would be.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I kept thinking is I hear that all the time. Like, I love this, but if I do it every day, am I going to learn to hate it? Because if like it becomes my job, it's like, it's not fun anymore.
Right. Like, Dave Ramsey always says that if you eat enough lobster, eventually it tastes like soap. Like life has to be about more than just money. And, you know, for him and a lot of stuff he teaches is like, for him, outrageous generosity really fuels him. Right. And kind of me as well, even within my industry, I want to be able to help just change people's lives. And when you change someone's life, that doesn't get old. I don't know what it is about that, but there's never a too much of that, right? There's never I just helped too many people. I'm tired of it.
Right.
Unless you're helping someone at your own, you know, detriment, right?
Yeah, unless it's draining.
But if you're doing fulfilling things for yourself and you're able to change people's lives for the better, and both you and the person's life that you just changed are both fulfilled, you will never tire of that. And for me, it had to make that shift from, oh, I love wakeboarding because I'm doing it for me. Well, no matter what it is, if you do it for you, you'll be satisfied at some point and be over it, right? I mean, people love cake. You eat enough cake, you feel horrible, right? Yeah. Even that tasty movie theater popcorn, after a while, you're like, ugh. And I would always tell my wife, I'd be like, next time I want to eat a bunch of popcorn at a movie theater, remind me of how horrible I feel right now. Right. So, for me, it made a shift. And that was when I had to get clear on what success meant for me. At that moment of do I continue to push for a career as a professional wakeboarder? Is that what I actually want?
Yeah.
Or what is it? And I loved the coaching and the teaching, and I wanted to help benefit and change people's lives. And so at that point, it was coaching. It shifted to influencing and coaching. And now that I've done that within the sport, I find that I'm getting kind of stuck. Like, I see people, I'm like, man, I want to keep helping you. I want to help you beyond this. And it's almost inappropriate to continue to help them in other parts of their life outside of wakeboarding. Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, dude, I just hired you to help me be a better wakeboarder. Like, you don't have to change all this other stuff in my life too. And I'm like, oh, you'll be happier. Right.
But you need it.
Right. So, I have found that passion has shifted, and I've gotten clear on what that was. My passion is not wakeboarding. I mean, I love wakeboarding, don't get me wrong. And my passion is not just coaching wakeboarding. Right. My passion is helping people and coaching people, right, and helping enrich and benefit their lives and helping them reach their full potential and breaking things down in an analytical way that can give you small progressive steps to your goal. Right.
Yeah.
So wherever people are, I find them where they are, I find out where they want to be. And half the time I have to reconstruct what they believe is possible and then build them a plan to that. Right. And that is fascinating for me, and it transcends wakeboarding. And so I'm trying to get to more people than just people who are interested from a wakeboarding perspective, I want to continue to bless other lives in that way. And so I become passionate about infusing knowledge into people that enriches and benefits their lives.
Yeah, I like how you talked about defining success, because I feel like we put money so much on like defining success and happiness, and one of my favorite books is called How Will You Measure Your Life? It's by Clayton M. Christensen. He's the guy like coined disruption, all that stuff, but it was one of the most amazing things, because he said there's so much more that like defines success than just money, even though that is important. It is important, but it's just cool to see how you've kind of found your path, you know, and what you love, and that you followed it too. You know, had the courage to follow it.
I love it. And I think that's important for all of our listeners to recognize, is that the actual act, you know, whether it's, you know, wakeboarding is a lot sexier than like bookkeeping or moving. Or,
Yeah.
You know, no one, you know, different from people who say they want to be a professional wakeboarder when they grow up. That's actually a cool kid dream. No one says that they want to be like a storage investor or a bookkeeper when they grow
or
up.
an accountant.
That's never on the list. But
Yeah, or a guy that moves people from house to house.
exactly, right? Like, who wants that? No one. But then you find your niche, and you find that it's really like caring about people, both your, you know, your team around you, your customers, you know, just that you can have some sort of impact, and that, you know, on top of it, there's a demand for it. And then all of a sudden your perspective changes, and it's like, yeah, I didn't want to grow up to be someone that moves people from house to house, but this is how I can help the most people. And same thing with wakeboarding. Like, you know, like you realized over time that you really cared more about the people. And I would say, like, just in my observation, like, I don't know how to measure wakeboarding talent, but I know how to measure coaching. And I think that as no matter if you were one of the best wakeboarders in the world, I think you'd be just as good of a coach. And I think that's something that you naturally gravitate to, is coaching people in, you know, just every aspect of life. So I'm excited to see the journey that you take as you dive more into coaching. And I think it's going to be just as successful as the wakeboarding coaching, if not more, with the life coaching and speaking and everything that you're headed to next. You know, it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Thanks. I appreciate that.
man, I've had a blast today. We really appreciate you coming on. Cal, was there anything we missed? I know we had so much to talk about.
Yeah, you know, unless like we got into like a little bit more about their new coaching aspect, like what you do exactly. I mean, I guess you could tell us more like about that service or that product or that you do for people.
Yeah, tell people where they can find you. Tell people what it is that you do, so that when they want your service, they can get you.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. So it's very odd, but it's really, really fun. So I, in a sense, join people on their vacations and infuse it with a whole bunch of progress and fun. So
you'll go anywhere.
I travel to my students, right? I hop on their boat, their waterway. I help them organize groups, you know, from 3 to 5 people per day, from 3 to 5 days in any area. I fly out to them. I'll crash in a spare room in their house or in their lake house or wherever. Occasionally I'll be in a hotel, but it's pretty rare because it's just more of an inconvenience than anything.
Yeah.
And then I'll coach them for, days in a row. We'll get up early. We'll get out there.
Get the glass.
Each person. Yeah. Hopefully we find good conditions. And then I'll coach each person from 20 to 30 minutes in the morning set. And then I'll ride and do a demo set at lunch, and then we'll have lunch, and then I'll coach everyone for 20 to 30 minutes in the afternoon. And then we'll have break and grab dinner and chat and hang out. And then I'll usually go back to my room and do some like video analysis requests and order fulfillment and all that. And then go to bed, wake up, do it again the next day. try to get a little bit of a workout in the morning before we get started if I can. It's kind of funky. I found that if I am able to exercise outside of wakeboarding, I can last way longer traveling before my joints start hurting, you know? So it sounds like more exercise would be more harmful, but actually if you do it the right way, it can give me more longevity as I'm traveling. So that part is super fun. Kind of a one-man band in that way. People, I'm helping them get set up in the right gear, because a lot of times they're riding gear that's, you know, 6-7 years old, and they've gained like 30 or 40 pounds since then. So they aren't on the right gear anymore. And then I'll have them try my board and my boots and stuff, and they'll hop in it and be like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm missing. Yeah, I definitely need to make some adjustments, and then I can help fulfill orders for them. I have a Bluetooth connected helmet and headset.
I've seen that.
So I'm able to talk to them in the middle of their set so they can hear me while they're riding. I can save a lot of falls that way. I'll cut them off if they're coming into the wake. I'm like, whoa, stop, reset, abort, right? And it's crazy. Like when I first got that communication headset, I was able to have people ride for like 20 minutes straight without ever falling. And normally I would have to stop and then talk to people through stuff. And then we'd get up and get going again and stop and then kind of correct some things and then get going again. And people were like, hey, can I just let go and rest my arms? We've been going a long time. And so like, I forgot how effective that was. And it just really ramped up the effectiveness of our short time together. And so, that's been a blast. I started selling that as well and helping people build their own communication packages. And, wow. And then I'm adding some more coaches to the site. The mentor that I had, at the wakeboard camp, has been just awesome to me in my life. And, so I have him now, as one of the options of coaches on the site, which is cool. And we'll continue to grow that panel of coaches. And nice. Then, trying to grow it into all the different companies I worked for sort of blended together. We'll see how that goes. And so if anyone listening is a wakeboarder and is interested, if you go to wakecoaches.com and poke around, you'll see kind of what we do and what options are available to you. But yeah, I after COVID have just been traveling domestically for the most part, with all the travel restrictions, but it'll start opening up into international stuff as well. The furthest I've traveled to coach was Dubai. Wow. And that was really fun. It was kind of crazy.
I bet. I'm jealous.
Very different. Yeah, very different out there. It was fun. Very salty salt water. And so like your fins don't track the same, like everything's looser. The boat doesn't sit in the water the same. And it was wild. So I love traveling and getting to meet new people and just serve different groups in different areas. And yeah, so it's a riot. It really is. And then in the wintertime, in the off season, I'll do some personal training. I do remote coaching as well, through some apps, whether it's personal training remotely or whether it's wakeboard coaching remotely. I had a guy that I coached in Moscow, Russia over the winter. So that was fun. So, I mean, it's anything that limits me from being able to serve the client, I try to eliminate the best I can. And if you've got any speaking opportunities that you're looking to fill, I've got some fun trainings and stuff to teach in the corporate world that is very relatable, yes. Right? It comes from this like fun, exciting world of wakeboarding, and then it gets real and it brings all those principles home to what they're doing now, which is a ton of fun to bring something kind of cool and fun and exciting into something anyone can do, even if they don't participate in the sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're like a different breed of human almost. It's pretty cool. I'm glad I got to get to know you a little bit. Just like your story, even in the beginning, like being able to be like, this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it for free. Like I'm going to pay to do this because I care so much. It's like, that's some serious grit, So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Tell them the website one more time.
So it's wakecoaches.com.
Wakecoaches.com.
Awesome.
And there's a free on Facebook, there's a wakeboard instruction group. that is free to join that myself and other coaches are on there. And we just, when we can, give out free advice. And the group has been kind of well trained as well. You'll get a few other veterans in there to kind of help. So a lot of people post up videos and ask questions, and there's a great community of wakeboarders there that will kind of help guide you along as well.
What a fascinating life. I mean, like, I just picture some guy with like a gold chain and a turban in Abu Dhabi just flipping backflips, and he's coaching them on the headset. That's a lot better than we and Callan went to the lake on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I was just coaching Callan between crashes, and I think he could have probably got better at coaching from you. So
yeah, man, let's make it happen.
We'll make it happen. There's no minimum level of experience they need to have before they call you, right? Like,
that's a good point.
No, the youngest wakeboarder I ever taught was 2 years old.
Whoa.
The oldest wakeboarder I ever taught was 82. I've coached people from never being on a board before to training for national competitions and all that. So.
That's probably maybe not better, but like probably better than all the bad habits, right? If you have someone that's brand new to wakeboarding and they just want to give it a shot, like that's probably more malleable clay for you, right?
Again. Well, yeah. So the great thing about this is it's such a benefit in either arena, but they're both for very different reasons. So if you're brand new starting out, yes, you have no bad habits that I have to work through, and man, you get through some of the fundamentals fast.
Yeah. And
it's great because we set you up for success early on. You don't make these assumptions about wakeboarding that we have to challenge later and kind of reprogram. But also for someone who's built bad habits, getting out of that without a coach is way hard. You can't see the forest through the trees. You have to reprogram what you're thinking, and you have to have someone come in and challenge that, because if you would have naturally gotten through it on your own, you would have already done it by now.
That's me.
So yeah, it's very much, it benefits both types, but in different ways.
Wow. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like your, cause I haven't been able to wakeboard a lot. Like I just haven't been able to go a bunch. So like when I go out, like I'm still I'm learning, I'm still trying to get a feel for it and stuff. But I want to be better. Is there like a certain amount, that you recommend like for that coaching, or can you get like, is there like a tier, like a basic to,
probably like
hard
2 or 3 days on the low end, and then like 4 or 5 if people want the full week, right?
So the least expensive version is a single trick video analysis. The least expensive version is go on wakeboard instruction and post and hope that you have a coach see it and respond for free. But
on the Facebook page.
Yeah, on the Facebook group. But the least expensive version is a single trick video analysis. And that can also be like, hey, give me a general overview on my riding. And then after that, you can do just a single set if you wanted to, as long as I'm in town, or if you come to me in the off season when, in Florida,
Central Florida.
That's an option as well. But the biggest benefit, because the problem is if I only teach you for 20 to 30 minutes, all we're going to do is I'm going to get to know your riding, and then we're going to find out what is holding you back. And so we're just going to expose all your flaws. And then I'm going to be like, all right, cool. Bye. Like we don't have enough time to fix
you up.
Like I can tell you what's going on and then guide you to some instructional videos or something of like, here's how you would fix them. And I might be able to fix a couple little things right away. But after just one set, you're going to be like, man, I need like 3 or 4 more sets to actually work through that with someone. I like to tell people that in the very first set, it really just opens your eyes to what coaching can do. But you won't see the results yet. So I like to have people, 3 days is awesome. If you can do that, 2 days, we can still pull off a lot. But 3 days is perfect. If you can have 2 sets a day for 3 days, so 6 total sets, we will essentially strip down and fix all the bad habits, and then we'll start building new ones. And then by the end of it, we can start putting together a few things, and you may even have some new tricks landed by the end of it, or have a very clear path on once you build some of those fundamentals up a little bit to know exactly how to get what you need done.
That's awesome.
But the biggest thing, like the theme behind it, is that most people don't want to do the stuff that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything in life, right? So riding switch, you know, your wrong foot forward, if you will, that's uncomfortable. So people don't do it.
Yes.
Hitting the wake toe side, uncomfortable. So people don't do it. So what happens is they stick with their comfort zone and they only develop their comfort zone. And then once their comfort zone is developed, they have to now go back because they hit a wall, and then they understand mathematically, shoot, I can't land switch. So I obviously can't do a 180, which requires a switch landing. I'm stuck until I learn that. And then they have to go back to this horribly uncomfortable position. And having to go backwards feels like you're not progressing, which makes it feel even more emotionally demotivating than it is uncomfortable. So now it's demotivating and uncomfortable, which makes you want to avoid it even more. And so people just get stuck in these hard plateaus of, just doing their heel side wake jumps, or maybe they learn a flip or something. And so it's like heel side wake jumps and maybe one flip, and that's it. Ben's turning red. He's
I'm seriously like, my conscience is burning right now.
But think about it this way. If you spend the time early on, just riding normal is uncomfortable, right? When you very first start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Riding switch is also going to be uncomfortable. Riding toe side is going to be uncomfortable. It's all equally uncomfortable, except for maybe your normal stance is like slightly more comfortable, just barely. If you work on it all, then what people don't believe in themselves is that this thing that is uncomfortable right now will never become comfortable for me.
Right.
And you can get it to the point where you forget which foot forward you are.
Yes.
Like you're riding switch and you're like, wait, am I switch or regular? I don't even know. Oh, wait. And then you have to think about it and be like, oh, I'm switch right now. Oh, weird. And that comes after you push past that like uncomfortable zone.
Comfort zone.
And it really is. So the trick that a coach will do, and this is the fun part, is I will take you into your discomfort to an extreme, and then we'll work our way back toward comfort. And that's so much easier. If you start from their comfort zone and try to work them into their uncomfortable, they're going to be resisting and dragging their heels the whole time. If I shock their system and force them into the most uncomfortable position possible, and then we work our way back, they naturally gravitate back. And so they're experiencing the full range of motion by starting in the most uncomfortable moment and then getting back into their comfort zone, because they will naturally progress that way. Otherwise, they're going to be fighting and digging in their heels, and they're going to hate it, and we're not going to get very far, and it's going to be frustrating. You just have to shock their system, put them in the most uncomfortable position possible, and then let them naturally gravitate toward their comfort as a means of learning. And they end up learning like 3 times as fast.
Wow.
That's brilliant. It's like a life lesson right there, just in wakeboarding. I never realized.
Well, that's where a lot of the speeches and corporate training stuff
come from, those lives, lessons, right? Like getting out of your comfort zone. And,
good metaphor for life.
Yeah, literally.
Well, think about it as a sales team. Let's say you're on a sales team and you're too timid. You need to learn to be more bold. And this may not be the best way to do it, but it just gets people thinking, right?
Right.
It's kind of shocking, so it gets people thinking. If you want to learn how to be more bold, you don't start from your timid side and then try to get just a little bit more bold. Just go offend 3 people on right? Like, don't come back until you've offended 3 people. And here's the thing. In that process, imagine that. Imagine they actually offend someone and then they back off and then they figure out exactly where it is. But that's usually not the way it works. What happens is they'll try and they can't do it because they think what normal bold is way more on the timid side of the scale than they realize. Their calibration is off, and that's why they're too timid.
Oh my gosh.
They feel like they're offensive. So what happens is they go and reset their calibration by trying to offend someone, and they're like, I can't do it. People aren't getting offended. They're like, I know.
That reminds me of totally side topic. My friends Matt Smith and Ben Smith, my friend Ben Smith got home from his mission, and his older brother Matt Smith said, well, here's what I want you to do. You need to go make out with 3 girls and dump all 3 to get in the habit of that, so you don't do anything stupid. And I don't know, when you brought up offend 3 people, it reminded me of that, dump 3 girls so you get in the habit.
Well, it's like I love that, because it's like it's like that fear, right? They're afraid because they have that wall as a sales guy, and they're afraid of maybe offending somebody, but it's like, it wasn't even like they were able to overcome that fear by actually just like taking that deeper plunge into trying to offend someone, and it's like you can't, and it just changes your programming.
It's just a way to reset your programming, exactly, because the proper way to do it is not to flirt with the line of overbearance, right?
Right.
It's actually to serve people better, and it just gives them that paradigm shift and helps them with that. But it does teach people when to reset how soft they need to be. If you have someone that's just obnoxiously soft on everything, then that's one way to shake them loose, right? Because what they're doing is, the principle is, go to their discomfort, work their way back to comfort. Because if you need to tell that person who's normally way too timid and not confident enough to be so confident that you're offensive, if you tell them, hey, you're being overbearing, can you back it off? Do you know how quick they're going to be able to do that? They're like, oh, sure. Back to comfort zone. And that's the idea, is you're teaching them how to reset things and how to do that. And man, that part's so fun, right? Being able to help people that way. But that is how coaching is. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is, right? It matters the steps of psychology, how the human brain works, how to get people to do it properly. Because the way that I coach, you're not actually thinking through tricks, and everyone assumes you are. No one thinks, all right, elbows here, arms here, hands here, eyes here, knees there, like feet here. Okay, now time this. I get questions like, when do you stand all the way tall on the wake? Like, what part of the wake are you standing all the way up on? And it's like, you're asking the wrong questions, man. You feel it. You don't think it, right? So think about walking. We've walked for a long time, and we learned it as kids. This is why people who learn a sport as a young child have a really hard time communicating the coaching skills required to an adult. They have to relearn those, because they go, I don't know, I just do it. I don't know how to explain it. It's just a feeling. And that's the point. It's a feeling. You know what it feels like, right? So if you told someone to heel strike on your right foot, toe strike on your right foot, shift your weight to your left foot by heel striking on your left foot, and then toe striking on your left foot, and then repeating that process. If you tell them to think that audibly in their brain while they walk or jog or run, they will trip over themselves. Yeah. You take someone who's the most natural looking walking person, that all of a sudden they look like a robot that's shutting down. Like your brain can't do it. Yeah. And so that's what people expect themselves to do on something physical like wakeboarding, but it's the same way in any other thing. People overthink stuff. And so if you can teach them what it feels like to shift their weight and to travel in one direction by, stabilizing a baby, right? They hold on to something and they're learning what it feels like to lean and catch themselves with their foot. Then you just tell them to walk and go that way and focus on speed or focus on comfortable, relaxed cadence. So I do the same thing. I teach people what the approach to that trick feels like, independent of the trick. I teach them what the takeoff feels like, independent of the trick. I teach them what it feels like in the air, independent of actually doing it. I teach them what it feels like to land. And then we start putting those things together, and then they have a feeling, right? Like when I do a trick, I just feel through it. I don't have to think what body part is doing what. And most people will make an assumption of what they think the trick is going to feel like, and then they execute based on that assumption. So I have to place people's, body positioning in the right place to help them do a drill that gets them to experience the feeling. And once they've felt it, they're like, oh, that's what you're talking about. And then they can find it. And then I say, hey, just run at the wake hard and go bounce off of it with that feeling that you felt when we were practicing. And they go, oh, I know exactly what to do now. And then they land their tricks like right away without hard falls.
Wow. Well, I think that's amazing. That's what sets you apart, is that how many pro athletes, there's a few, but how many pro athletes can just take the feeling and then learn the psychology of coaching too, right? So I think that's a really incredible skill set. So
yeah, they just haven't focused on it, right? Like if you spend time trying to reverse engineer it, and see how people learn it and what common problems there are. You spend enough time doing it, enough time caring about people, enough time focusing on it, you'll develop it. I love it. And a lot of it comes really natural to me. So, that it is so much fun, because when people start doing stuff for the first time, like I had a guy in his late 30s at the time, who was like, there's no way you're getting me upside down without breaking me in half. And then first day we got him upside down and he was just like belly laughing at the end. Right.
I bet.
And it's just so cool. It's so cool to see people like, what? No way. I didn't think I could do that. And then becoming the person that they thought there was no way they could become.
Hey, Brandon, I think it would be awesome for our audience to get a little bit of a sample of what you do and see if like you can give them a little bit of a takeaway of things that are independent of wakeboarding, just because we might not have, a ton of wakeboarders that are listening, but definitely wanting to be able to take something good out of this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is some of the speeches that I do apply to broader audiences, right? And I'll give you a little piece of it and a little action item that you can kind of take and hopefully shift your perspective on a few things that you're up against in your life, right? Things that scare you a little bit, or things that you perceive to be too risky. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary Free Solo.
Love it.
It's
mind blowing.
I haven't seen it.
What?
Okay.
Are you freaking kidding me?
I'm not. I haven't seen it.
Dude. Okay. We got to have another conversation because that's must see TV.
It's really cool. So Alex Honnold is a rock climber that climbs El Capitan without ropes in Yosemite. So like sheer rock face, like biggest in the world, the most vertical, scariest thing ever. So in the documentary, there's a part that's kind of comical where they're like, I think this guy's brain doesn't work, right? Like there's no way that a normal person would be like, yeah, I'm gonna climb that without ropes. So they did like brain scans on him, and apparently he doesn't register fear the same way everyone else does.
Literally.
And it gives, literally, it's amazing. And it gives him this really unique perspective that just hit me like a gut punch when I watched this. And he said something that has stuck with me ever since. And he said, people always tell me that what I'm doing is too risky. And he's like, no, it's not. It's not risky. He said, well, of course, like the consequence is death if I fail. Right? So, but what he pointed out was that people often conflate the concept of risk and consequences, and that they're separate. And that was fascinating to me. So his concept of risk and risk defined as exposure to danger, right? So if he has worked his risk down, how did he do that? Right? He did it in low consequence environments first before he went into a high consequence environment. Because if I was to climb El Capitan with no ropes, high risk, high consequence, pretty much guarantee I'm going to die. So, right. But if I wanted to do that, let's say I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set out to do it. I don't want to do something that's high risk and high consequence at the same time. That is what we are registering when we are just like deathly afraid, is we're like the risk is too high and the consequence is too high. Now think about it. If I was to climb, an indoor climbing thing with a giant foam pit below and ropes and an instructor, like, sure. Right. I'll do it. Even if it's literally the same handholds and footholds as El Capitan.
Right.
Right. What's the difference? My body's moving the same way, but there's all this, reduction in consequence. And what happens is as I get better and better at each handhold and each foothold, and I memorize it, and I've done it hundreds of times with ropes, and I've thought about this and dreamt about it, and I know every single piece of that rock face like Alex does, right?
Yeah.
He's working his risk down. His likelihood of failure is really low. So that gives him permission to not be super freaked out, aside from the fact that his brain doesn't register fear like everyone else. It allows you to jack your consequences to the sky, right? So this is how I actually break down tricks for people in wakeboarding, right? instead of doing it at 23 miles an hour with full ballast at a long rope length and just sending it wake to wake your first attempt. No, we're going to go like 13 miles an hour on the surface. And we're going to slide through your first 360. And we're going to make it really easy to where if you fall, it does not hurt because you're almost guaranteed to fall. And sometimes I have people fail on purpose so they can experience it. So they know what to fight against, right? Once we take the risk, we know it's high. So go low consequence. And then we work the consequences down or the risk down. And it gives us permission to go, okay, now we'll go, you know, a little faster, maybe one wake and then wake to wake. And then, you know, shoot, send it off the double up or something crazy. Right. So
wow.
Anything in your life that you're registering, like that's too big of a thing, I'm afraid, or I'm getting uncomfortable because I feel like it's too risky for me. Right. Even if it's an investment, like we do the same thing with investments. Right.
Yeah.
How long has that investment had good returns? Is it a 10+ year track record? Cool. You're working the risk down. So you're able to throw more money in it because the consequences are a little higher. Right. It's the same concept. So whatever it is you're up against, whatever mountain is in front of you, right, figuratively, which kind of works in this analogy, figure out why you're freaked out. And is it because you're doing it high risk? You haven't proved it yet and your consequences are high? If so, figure out how to manipulate your consequences first, because you can't just cross your fingers and hope the risk goes down. You have to work risk down through experience. And the way to get that wisdom and experience is by working at it in a low consequence environment first, proving the theory. So they sort of work inversely. And the scariest moment is when they start to pass each other. When it's just high consequence enough, but the risk is coming down, there will be a moment where you're like, all right, this is it. There's no way to work it any other way. And then your confidence gets back up and you're going there. And then you're at the level of mastery, which Alex was.
Yeah.
So he hit mastery. He's able to have high consequence. And here's the thing. When you have high consequence stuff like scaling El Capitan, you are able to have high results as a consequence if you do it successfully. If you fail, you die. If you win, you get a book tour, you get world records, you get a documentary.
You're set
right?
for life. Yeah.
Right. So whatever it is, don't shy away from it. Find out how to jack the consequences to the floor, work the risk down. Once the risk is down, this is the stuff people don't have patience for. Work the risk down, then jack the consequences up, and then you can accomplish anything. If you have the time and energy to put into it, to work that relationship between risk and consequences to your benefit, that is when you step out there and people think you're an overnight success. I don't know how you did it. That's amazing. This guy's fantastic and amazing. No, he put in the work.
Yeah.
And that's how you figure it out. So figure it out. Whatever it is in your life that's freaking you out, you're not sure if you can do it, look at the relationship between the two, manipulate it, and make a plan. And that is how you get through it. That's how I do it with my wakeboard students. That's how amazing people who have accomplished amazing things do it. They just don't tell you about the grueling time it took in these low consequence environments to get it right the first time.
So what would you say to someone who they want to start a business? They're working a normal job, and they have a couple kids, and they have a mortgage, and they might have a car payment, and they're just like I can't. It's like I can't start a business unless I go all in, because it's like it won't be successful unless you like really put in the work. But I'm like I have to feed my family. I gotta pay these medical bills from, the hospital because we just had a baby, or, I have to pay a mortgage. Like, what would you say to that? Or how do they, because you have experience.
Yes. I kind of did it not the right way.
Like that's like your kind of your story. I mean, you had all those risks. You had a wife, you had kids, I don't know if you were staying somewhere, if you tried to how you figured it out, but.
So we tried the only way I could do it at that time, because I was trying to get a normal job and it wasn't working that way, right? The way that I saw it working was we aggressively got out of debt first, and then we slammed our lifestyle to the floor. So we actually moved across the country and stayed in my in-laws' unfinished basement for a year.
Wow.
Like We lived with no walls, just 2x4 studs on cement, like camping, right? Like it was crazy. I would not recommend anyone do that.
It was a camp out, right?
It was, if I had to do it over again, I would have done it a little different. But my point is, I was trying to find a way to push these consequences down, right? I have almost no expenses. So if I don't make a ton of money, I don't go bankrupt, right? So here's how I would advise it if you're a normal person with a normal life and not the crazy whirlwind that I was in at the time. All you need to do is work a side hustle outside of your job. Make it profitable enough for you to make the jump.
Yep.
Because if you go, I'm just going to quit my job tomorrow and we'll be successful, you probably won't. And then you're going to get frustrated, and then you're not going to be able to pay your bills. And then you're going to get talked into doing stuff for your business that you never otherwise would have had you been mentally healthy because you have enough money to live. You will make decisions based on, this is going to feed my family, even though it's not the best for the business in the long term. It's a short-term win, and it's going to let me feed my family. And then it's going to end up making your business just suffer, and it's not going to grow the right way. So you can't build it from a place of desperation. You have to build it from a place of options. And the way to build options is just to work your guts out now. You're going to be working your guts out full time, and you're going to be working your guts out if you have a full-time job and a side hustle. And start side hustling it as hard as you can until that thing is starting to bring in enough money for you to be like, hey, we can actually kind of live on this income. If I quit my full-time job, I think we can do it. And then that gap between where you are and where you want to be is closing, right? We're working that relationship where right now, jumping into a business you've never proven to be successful on your own is high risk. You quit your job and rely on this high risk thing, that's also high consequences. So the reason you're freaked out to quit your job and start a business is because it's high risk, high consequences. So if it's high risk, you're probably going to fail a little bit in the beginning. Go low consequences. Don't rely on it for your daily income, right? Work the risk down, have it prove its model. And you're like, I know it's working because money is coming out of it and it's functional and I can test it and I can prove it. And then when that risk is low, you can go, sweet, here we go. Jack up the consequences by relying on it, but only once you've removed that risk in a low consequence environment. So it's the same concept, right?
Yeah.
And no one wants to do that because no one wants to work 60, 80 hours a week. You know what I mean?
Right.
They just don't. But the thing
YouTube.
is when you're running your own business and you're in a place of desperation and like the only way to get the money to come in to make it all happen is working 80 hours a week, you're going to work 80 hours a week. You're just going to do it.
Yeah.
So convincing yourself that it's going to be a convenient, easy 40-hour work week once you're in your business is not necessarily accurate anyway. So why not go from, 40 to 80 hours and get the side hustle, like just pumping. And then if you can survive on that 40 hours, then you can quit your job. And all of a sudden, guess what? You've got a 40-hour work week making enough doing that. And maybe it doesn't work out that way financially or whatever. Maybe you've got to piece it together a different way. But what that experience is going to do is going to teach you how to manipulate the risk and consequences because you're going to know it. You're not just going to guess.
Yeah, it takes me back to like you talking about comfort too. Even like the wakeboarding analogy of like you have to get uncomfortable. Like you won't be able to do a backflip off a wake if you never get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. That's a huge takeaway for our listeners. Manipulating risk and consequences on our terms, right? Then we can have the confidence to pull the trigger. And balancing that with the other thing you taught us of, flying the plane, but building the plane as you're flying it, right? You can't wait till your side hustle is like perfect, but you can get at least a proof of concept and a little bit of income. And then you can make that leap once the consequences and risk are where you want them to be, right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, yes, you're building a plane as you're flying it, but you also have a parachute on your back. You know what I mean? Like
I love it.
Because right? Like, let's lower the consequences a little bit until this thing's flying,
Throw the parachute on.
It definitely your normal sustainable income would be, that parachute, if you will. I mean, it's not a perfect analogy. We're just blowing holes in this thing left and right. but yeah, that's the idea is, and even with all the coaching stuff, if you take something to an extreme and then back off, then that goal feels easier. So surpass your goal and then back off, and whatever you're trying to accomplish is going to feel a lot easier. So if that means working way harder than you've ever worked and then backing off, it's going to feel just psychologically like you've made it.
Huge takeaway for our listeners. Thank you again so much for coming on today. I know I learned a ton, and I feel like everyone that participates will as well. Callan Webster and Ben Goffredson are your hosts, and we had our guest today, Brandon Judd. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.